Looking around, transitioning our focus to the NBA, I just have one thing to say. Who the hell is Tingus Pingus? I don't even know about fucking Latinia. Kristaps Porzingis has been traded to the Celtics after a couple of attempts from the Celtics to acquire him. They attempted a 3-team trade with the Clippers, and ultimately it fell through because Malcolm Brogdon had injury concerns, and after that it kind of looked like it wouldn't go through at all, but they were able to make it happen, swapping out Brogdon for Marcus Smart, and the Clippers dropped out of the deal, and instead of them, the Grizzlies swung in, and they were the third team in the deal, which is definitely an interesting piece for the Celtics to add. You know, they came close to the NBA Finals. They've kind of been on the cusp of reaching or getting a championship for a little while now, and you'd think Porzingis is the one thing that they'd kind of need to get over the hump. And so my question to you, Simon, would be, do you think Porzingis will be that piece for them? Do you think this is what pushes them to a championship, or do you think it's another kind of lateral move for them?
I'm not really sure, to be honest with you, because I think it is a really, really good addition all over. Because obviously Porzingis, he's solid everywhere on the court. He had a block and a half per game last year, pretty solid in the paint. The one interesting thing is the Celtics already have a lot of big men. They already have Al Horford. They already have Robert Williams. And I don't know if Porzingis is probably better than both of them. I feel like, he's better than both of them. And obviously it is an improvement, but I don't know if it's an improvement they necessarily needed. I feel like he would have been fine with Al Horford down there. But I mean, he's averaged, we were talking about this before, he's averaged between 20 to 23 points per game for the last 5 years. And obviously bringing that onto the team is going to be awesome. I feel like the Celtics are going to really benefit from that. But at the same time, you're also losing, not arguably, your best defensive player, especially in the backcourt, in Marcus Smart, who averaged steal and a half, and was probably guarding the best guard on the other side on the other teams for most of the time. So I'm just curious who's going to replace Smart defensively for the Celtics. That's interesting to me. And I mean, I don't hate it. I hated it at the beginning. I will say that because, and we did talk about this again, the DC effect. I did not realize Porzingis had been averaging 23 points last year, and I don't know how I didn't, because obviously, a guy like Porzingis averaging 23 points, if he was still on the Knicks, you'd be hearing about that all the time. But because he's playing for the Wizards, who cares, right? So it's really interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I personally think it's kind of, you mentioned lateral as one of the options. I feel like it's not a big enough improvement for me to say that it's going to be the game-changing move that takes them to the next level, but it's also definitely not a bad move.
Yeah, you wonder how much of it was made out of desperation too, because if you're looking at that original trade where they don't give up Marcus Smart and they get to keep him, do you think that would be less of a lateral move and more of an actual improvement if they give up Malcolm Brogdon instead of Marcus Smart?
I would definitely say that would have been a better move for the Celtics. I think Brogdon is not as, while he's still a great player in his own right, not as much as a defensive guy. And obviously, the way I look at it is you trade Brogdon instead, and you're trading an offensive guy for an offensive guy, right? You're trading Brogdon and bringing in another guy who's going to replace his points. And while Porzingis is going to do that in a half for what he brings in to replace Marcus Smart, because he doubles Smart in point per game average, but that's not the point, right? It's not the important thing. It's obviously the defensive presence that Marcus Smart brings, and who's going to step up to replace that is the thing that I keep going back to whenever I think that. So you again asked if I would have preferred to trade Brogdon. Hell yeah. I would have moved Brogdon in a heartbeat over Marcus Smart, because Marcus Smart is also a guy, he's been a Celtic his entire career. He's a loyal guy. He wanted to retire a Celtic. You all the things that came out about the trade or saying that Marcus Smart was devastated about it and obviously wanted to stay with the Celtics, but that's the game. That's basketball. So
Yeah.
that's that, I guess.
You wonder how much of it was made out of desperation after the first one fell through, because it was done so
Yeah.
quickly, right? I remember just kind of checking the score again and again and again throughout the day, just keeping up with the news, seeing at about like noon that the first trade had gone through, seeing at about like 8 p.m. that it had fallen through, it wasn't going to happen, and then only like 2 hours later, the real trade was announced with Smart going to the Grizzlies, which I think is interesting how quickly they were able to rebound and get another team in on it. Like how...
I think it's a really good trade for the Grizzlies, I'd argue. They're bringing, after, obviously, everybody's heard about John Morant's going to be out for the first 25 games. They're bringing in a guy who cannot replace John Morant. John Morant is one of the best point guards in the league, but you're bringing in a guy who is better defensively, and of all people to bring in to replace John Morant, I'm sure that's not the worst. That's not a terrible guy to bring in. He's a very, very good backup point guard when John Morant comes back. Maybe he can even sneak into the starting lineup and play shooting guard. Who knows? But I think it'll be interesting to see how they use it.
Yeah, it definitely will be. And you kind of look at it and think, like, if there's any real winner of the trade, that might be the Grizzlies. Because look at what the Wizards didn't get back too much either. They got Tyus Jones from the Grizzlies, Danilo Galliardi from the Celtics, as well as Mike Muscala and the 35th pick in the draft. Like, they're not getting too much, and they dealt the biggest name in the draft, right? Whereas the Grizzlies are getting Marcus Smart, the Celtics are getting Porzingis, the 25th pick in the draft, and another first-round pick, which is quite interesting. So they're getting Porzingis and a couple firsts. But like, really, like, what are the Wizards getting from this, right? Like, you wonder why they make that deal.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm not too sure on that one. I'd say, I don't know. I'd say, actually, after looking at it a bit more, I'd say the Celtics won. Getting Porzingis and 2 firsts is a hell of a pull, to be honest with you. And, I mean, again, you're losing your best defensive player, but who knows? If you can find the right guy to step up and replace him, then it works out for everybody.
Mm-hmm. I wonder...
And like I did mention, the Grizzlies are also winning there. They're getting a very, very solid player, too.
This is true. They, the 2 first-round picks kind of got lost in the shuffle, right? You don't... When you hear how this was covered, it was all about Porzingis and Smart. But the fact that the Celtics were able to get 2 first-round picks for that adds quite a bit, right? And
yeah, for sure. It's definitely a big part of it. It's not the first thing that stuck out to me, like you said, but it's definitely a little bit of an extra push for me to say that they probably won it. Although, like I said, it's tough for me because I really think that a defensive guard like Marcus Smart can be so valuable to these contending teams. When you need to defend guys going up the Eastern Conference, you're talking like all these elite guards on the Eastern side. It's so hard to find the right guy to do that, and Marcus Smart was capable of doing that. And now you're gonna have to find a new guy to slide into that role. And I don't think the Celtics are gonna have an easy time doing that at all.
Yeah, I find this interesting. So I'm not really sure how this. So the webs on NBA.com, I'm looking. The Grizzlies. It says that the Celtics received the 25th pick in the draft. I don't know how accurate that is though, because looking at the draft from today, the Grizzlies still owned the pick. That's interesting.
That is interesting. I don't know on that.
Let's see.
It could it have been or that would make sense. I'm not sure.
Let me see. I know this is part of the whole story too, is how messy this trade was, right? There were so many pieces going back and forth. Yeah, I'm still seeing that the Celtics supposedly...
I'm looking at the entire thing, and it's pretty confusing.
Yeah, the Celtics supposedly received the 25th overall pick, but in the actual draft, the Grizzlies are the one who picked. They picked Marcus Sasser, point guard from Houston.
Yeah, that is interesting. Well, overall, I said who I think won it. I think it's close. I think it's the Celtics. I think that the Grizzlies are close second, though. Who do you think won?
Yeah, I'd probably agree with you. Although it'll be interesting to see how Smart does in Memphis, because that'll be, once Ja Morant comes back, is he the thing that kind of puts that team over the top? That extra defensive. He seems like the perfect kind of depth player that they need to provide the defensive support.
I definitely agree with that. Yeah, because when I think of Ja Morant, I do think he's not a bad defender by any mean, but he's definitely not. He's an average defender, right? Like, you're not going to get anything special on the defensive side from Ja Morant. But you slide Marcus Smart in there at shooting guard to maybe cover the point guard instead, and all of a sudden, it's a different story, right? All of a sudden, you're a lot better off, I'd argue. But, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they utilize him, because who knows? Marcus Smart is a decently... He's not I don't believe he's a small guy either. So he's... I don't think... I feel like he can guard a lot of different players. And he's 6'4". That's not bad. He can definitely still guard a small forward. And like, there's a lot of different ways that a player like him can be used. And like you said, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Grizzlies use him.
So, okay, I'll before we end it, I'll clear up the confusion. I think I figured out what happened. It is confusing. So, the original trade was that Boston got the 25th overall pick. They said the trade because that trade happened during the draft, after the draft began. It says the trades are not confirmed until the next day. So they, the Grizzlies traded the pick to the Celtics before the draft happened, and then
the Celtics told them who to take.
No, the Celtics, and then they made another trade with that pick, sending it to Detroit. So Detroit acquired the draft rights to Marcus Sasser, who was taken with the 25th pick, and then Boston acquired the rights to the player that the Pistons took, as well as 2 future second-round picks. So in the end, Boston got a future first-round pick in 2024. The player that Detroit took, who I believe was at the start of the second round, and 2 future second-round picks. So it's basically 3 second-round picks, a first-round pick, and Porzingis was the return for Boston. Very complicated, but that's how it ultimately played out.
Okay. Can I be honest with you?
Yeah.
You lost me a minute ago. But the important thing, Celtics got a couple... It sounds like everybody got their guy, everybody wins. Simon doesn't need him. That's the important thing.